The stars had always been a distant, unknowable presence for humanity, silent, vast, and indifferent. But for the powerful empire that ruled the galaxy, humanity had always been a curiosity, a fragile, primitive species of Earth. The empire had experimented on Earth for centuries, altering the planet's atmosphere, engineering its creatures, and even guiding the humans toward a future that had been carefully planned. But their plans had backfired. Humanity, despite its primitive nature, had defied their expectations at every turn. For years, the caretakers, an elite group of genetically enhanced beings, had believed they could control and guide humanity. They had built cities that hummed with alien technology, and their methods had ensured that Earth's children were raised in a controlled environment, nurtured to be powerful tools for the Empire's future. However, they had underestimated the most fundamental part of human nature: their will to survive, to fight against adversity, to grow stronger when faced with impossible odds. And when the Empire's plans began to unravel, the caretakers were forced to make a choice: abandon Earth or risk being wiped out by the very children they had raised. It wasn't a difficult decision for the Empire. They were not sentimental about their experiments. Humanity was expendable. Earth, to them, was just another failed project, a planet that had produced results not as expected. The caretakers had been given orders to cleanse the world of its inhabitants, but they hesitated. There were still remnants of human children scattered across the planet, children they had nurtured, children they had crafted. They couldn't simply erase them, not without consequences. And so, in their infinite wisdom, the caretakers chose the most expedient solution. They would abandon Earth, pulling back to their empire's core worlds, leaving the human children behind to fend for themselves. With a calculated, cold decision, the caretakers initiated the final phase of the withdrawal. Great ships began to lift off from Earth's atmosphere, leaving the planet behind in an unrelenting silence. The skies above Earth, once filled with alien ships and the hum of advanced technology, grew quiet. The last transmissions between the caretakers and their fleet were curt, their final messages cold and distant, their hearts untouched by the fate of the children they had left behind. The atmosphere over the Earth cracked as the last ships vanished into the stars, and the children, from all corners of the globe, found themselves alone. No caretakers, no guardians, no guiding hands, only the ruins of their once prosperous world and a galaxy of unknown threats. At first, the world seemed doomed. With the adults gone, Earth became a wasteland, destroyed by wars, by the careless experiments of the caretakers. But what the Empire never expected, what they could never have anticipated, was the human spirit. In the ruins of the cities, human children began to gather. They had been taught survival in the most basic forms, but what they lacked in physical strength, they made up for with something far greater: adaptability. They didn't understand the full scope of the world they had inherited, but they had been born with an innate ability to learn, to innovate, to push boundaries. While the Empire had thought them weak, these children, some as young as 5, saw the world not as a threat, but as an opportunity. The caretakers had overlooked one thing. They had forgotten the truth about humanity. Humans could survive, even if the odds were stacked against them. Even when the universe itself seemed ready to crush them, humanity would fight back. The children, for better or worse, had inherited that same relentless drive. The first steps toward survival were shaky, but as the children slowly formed their own communities in the shadows of their fallen world, they would prove the caretakers wrong. The caretakers thought they had escaped their creation. What they didn't realize was that they had only unleashed humanity's greatest strength, their ability to overcome, to thrive against all odds. And Earth's children weren't just going to survive. They were going to change everything. In the early days after the caretakers' departure, the world seemed a place of endless, unyielding chaos. The towering cities, once bustling with advanced technology and life, now lay in ruin. Crumbling skyscrapers, twisted metal, and shattered glass littered the streets, creating a jagged maze that few could navigate without injury. The air, once kept pristine by alien technology, was now thick with the aftermath of the failed experiments. Yet, amidst this apocalyptic backdrop, the children, scattered across the globe, began to gather, to form groups, to find strength in their unity. They were young, fragile by any other standard, but they were also sharp. They had inherited the best parts of humanity: an insatiable curiosity, a need to explore, and above all, an unbreakable desire to live. These were children who had never known true hardship, never been taught how to truly survive in a wild, untamed world. They were left behind by those who believed their survival was a mere improbability. But as the first rains fell upon the cracked earth, something shifted within them. A group of children, no older than 10, led by a resourceful girl named Leela, found each other in the remains of a broken city. Lila's parents had been scientists working with the caretakers, helping to engineer the technology that had once ensured humanity's prosperity. When the sky had burned with the retreat of the alien ships, Lila's world had crumbled. But she had inherited more than just scientific knowledge. Her mother had always told her, "You have to look deeper than the surface, find the connections, and adapt to the world you're given." With nothing left but a few scattered scraps of technology, Lila quickly became the leader of her ragtag group. She was an unlikely commander, a 10-year-old girl with no formal training. But the group followed her, not because of her age, but because of her unwavering determination and her innate understanding of how to survive. Lila taught them how to scavenge the ruins, how to find food where it seemed impossible, how to make shelter from the debris. The children had no choice but to learn quickly. Every day was a test of their will. The environment had become an enemy itself. Wild animals, once confined to remote areas, roamed the cities in search of food. Formerly docile creatures, now wild and unpredictable, hunted them in packs. But Leela had a mind that never stopped thinking. When she and her group were cornered by a pack of aggressive, mutated wild dogs, it wasn't brute strength that saved them. It was Leela's quick thinking. She used an old streetlight and a few discarded wires to create an improvised shock trap, sending the animals fleeing in a panic. With each passing day, Lila's group grew stronger, not just in physical endurance, but in unity. They learned to cooperate with one another, pooling their strengths and covering for each other's weaknesses. Where one child was a natural hunter, another was gifted at problem-solving, while a third was an expert at building shelter from anything they could find. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were starting to thrive. Leela's group wasn't the only one. Across the shattered world, other children, lost and abandoned, began to find one another. In the mountain forests of Asia, a boy named Kai had formed his own group, teaching them how to fish with makeshift spears and hunt in the dense woods. In the ruins of the African savanna, another child leader, Asha, built a network of survivors from the scattered tribes who had managed to endure the devastation. They didn't have the guidance of the caretakers, but they had something else: each other. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the world that had once seemed so unforgiving began to feel like home. The children who had been abandoned now found themselves in control of their own destinies. They began to rebuild, not just for survival, but for something more, something that hadn't been possible under the caretaker's watchful eye: freedom. With every challenge they overcame, the children became more than just survivors. They were inventors, explorers, and creators. They were humanity's next generation, and though the caretakers had abandoned them, they had unknowingly given them the greatest gift of all: an opportunity to shape the world in their own image. They didn't just adapt to their new reality. They transformed it. The children had long since accepted the harsh reality of their world. The days of comfortable life under the caretakers were a distant memory. They had learned to live in the shadows of fallen cities, crafting their own futures from the wreckage of the past. But just as the fragile sense of security they had built began to solidify, a new threat emerged. a reminder that the caretaker's departure hadn't erased the presence of the Empire. It was an ordinary afternoon when the first sign appeared. Leela, now recognized as a leader by her growing community, had just returned from a scouting trip through the decimated city. She carried with her an assortment of scavenged supplies, rusted tools, a handful of seeds, and a damaged alien communication device. As she entered the makeshift shelter her group had created, she noticed a strange, high-pitched hum that seemed to vibrate through the air. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, sharper. A child named Theo, a clever 12-year-old with a knack for detecting mechanical anomalies, hurried over to her. "Leela, there's something wrong," he said, eyes wide. "I've been hearing that sound for hours now, and it's not natural." Leela's heart skipped a beat. She had seen the signs before. The faint hum of advanced alien technology, the kind the caretakers had used to manipulate Earth. The children had never seen the full force of the caretaker's power, only its remnants, but they knew enough to recognize the danger. Leela turned to the group. "Prepare yourselves. Something's coming." The children quickly mobilized, gathering what weapons and tools they could, fortifying their shelters. They had learned how to create makeshift barricades from scrap metal, and each child had a role. Some were sent to hide in the nearby ruins, others prepared traps and distractions. The sound continued to grow louder, almost vibrating the ground beneath their feet. It wasn't long before the source of the sound revealed itself. A sleek, silent ship descended from the sky, its dark, metallic surface reflecting the dying light of the sun. The ship's outline was unlike anything the children had seen before, sharp and angular, with strange symbols etched into its hull. The craft hovered for a moment, then slowly touched down in a deserted square nearby. Leela's heart pounded. She had known this moment was coming. She had known that the Empire couldn't just leave Earth alone. They were watching, always watching, but she hadn't expected them to return so soon. From the ship's hatch, a group of beings emerged. They were humanoid in shape, but clearly alien, tall with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed faintly. Their skin shimmered with a strange iridescence, and their movements were smooth, unnervingly fluid. These were not the caretakers. These were soldiers, elite operatives sent to assess the situation. They carried weapons designed to incapacitate, not kill, though Leela knew that if these beings were truly determined, they could wipe them out with ease. Leela's mind raced. The children had never faced a real enemy, only the unpredictable dangers of the Earth. Now they faced an army, alien, relentless, and prepared. But there was something else she could sense in the air, something beyond fear, determination. The children were not going to run. They had endured too much, grown too strong. Leela quickly made her decision. "Everyone, we fight," she whispered, her voice steady. The group nodded, their faces a mixture of fear and resolve. They knew they couldn't overpower the aliens in a head-on fight, but they had something far more valuable: knowledge of their environment. Leela motioned for her group to fall back into the ruins, where the alien invaders couldn't track them easily. From there, they would strike with precision, using the very world the caretakers had abandoned to their advantage. They had learned the art of survival, of cleverness over brute force, and now it was time to put that knowledge to the test. As the alien soldiers advanced into the heart of the city, unaware of the trap being set around them, Leela's heart quickened. The children were no longer helpless. They weren't prey. They were hunters. And as the first of the alien soldiers stepped into a cleverly concealed pit, they would learn just how wrong they had been to underestimate the humans. The children's traps were set. Hidden in the crumbling foundations of a long-forgotten city, Leela and her group moved like shadows, barely making a sound as they watched the alien soldiers advance. The soldiers, tall and imposing, had underestimated them entirely, convinced they would find nothing but helpless, frail children. But they had not counted on the sheer ingenuity and willpower the children had developed in their brief, yet brutal, existence. Leela crouched behind a broken wall, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Her heart raced, but her mind was calm, calculating. In the days since the ship had landed, she had watched the aliens carefully, studying their movements, their patterns, the technology they carried. It was all so familiar, technology she had seen fragments of but never fully understood. It was a language, a way of thinking, a tool of the Empire, and more importantly, it was a key. The alien soldiers had no idea that the children were watching, waiting, listening. They stepped into a narrow alleyway, their armored feet clanking against the broken pavement. The first soldier was the target. Leela's hand shot out, signaling the group to spring the trap. The ground beneath the soldier's feet gave way, and the first soldier tumbled into a pit hidden under layers of debris. The others froze, staring in disbelief. The trap wasn't lethal, but it was enough to disorient and incapacitate. As the soldier struggled to free himself, his companions reacted too slowly, too confused. In that moment, Leela made her move. From a distance, Theo, the boy with a talent for mechanics, flipped the switch on a makeshift device they had built from scavenged alien technology, a pulse generator. The weapon hummed to life, sending out an electromagnetic burst that disabled the soldiers' energy shields and weapons. The aliens froze, their technology momentarily useless, their bodies vulnerable. "Now," Leela shouted. Her group moved as one. The children darted from cover, agile and quick, surprising the aliens at every turn. Theo, despite his young age, wielded a jagged piece of alien tech like a seasoned warrior, using it to knock out the enemy's comms and disrupt their tech further. Ava, a girl with quick hands and even quicker instincts, disarmed another soldier, using their own weapon against them. The children had spent months honing their skills, each new lesson learned from their environment, each mistake a stepping stone to a new victory. This was no longer just survival. It was a fight for their future. One of the soldiers, realizing their weapons were useless, drew a long blade from its sheath. He swung it toward one of the children, but it never connected. Leela, with an unexpected fluidity, ducked under his arm, kicking his legs out from under him. He crashed to the ground, unable to rise as she pinned him with a discarded piece of machinery. The aliens were strong, but the children had learned to fight differently, not with raw strength, but with precision and guile. It wasn't long before the remaining soldiers, now outnumbered and surrounded, began to retreat. But not before Leela saw something unexpected, a flicker of respect in the eyes of the alien officer who had been commanding the group. It was subtle, a brief glance at her before he turned and ordered his soldiers to fall back. But it was there. He had expected to crush them. Instead, they had fought back, smart, fast, and ruthless. As the last of the aliens flowed into the horizon, Leela stood tall, breathless but unshaken. The children had won their first real victory. It was not just a testament to their skill, but to their ability to adapt, to learn from the remnants of the Empire's technology, and turn it to their advantage. Theo, still breathing heavily, grinned. "We did it. We beat them." Leela's eyes scanned the battlefield, her mind already turning to the next step. This victory was only a small part of a much larger battle. They had sent a message, loud and clear. The children of Earth weren't weak. They weren't helpless. They had the potential to fight back, to reclaim their planet, and maybe, just maybe, take back the future the caretakers had stolen from them. But Leela knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The Empire had noticed them, and they would come back. But the children weren't afraid. They had just begun to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The wind was harsh, swirling through the skeletal remains of the city as Leela and her group gathered, still catching their breath after their first real victory. The alien soldiers had retreated, but the weight of their presence still hung heavy in the air. They had come in full force, but they had underestimated the children. Now the universe knew that Earth was not a world of easy conquest. Leela stood tall, staring at the distant horizon, where the alien craft had vanished. Her heart pounded, but the adrenaline from the battle was already fading, replaced by a stark realization. The fight was far from over. The Empire was not the type to back down after one loss. If anything, this defeat would only fuel their determination to crush the humans who had dared defy them. "We need to move fast," Leela said, her voice steady but urgent. "They'll be back, and they won't make the same mistake again." The children, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, nodded in agreement. They had fought with everything they had, and though they had succeeded, they had also realized something crucial. They were far from ready to face a full-scale invasion. The aliens had far more resources, more soldiers, and technology beyond their comprehension. If they were going to survive, they needed to be smarter, faster, and more organized. Leela turned to Theo. "How long until the alien tech we disabled can be repaired?" Theo, his eyes sharp as ever, examined the damaged devices strewn around them. "We've got maybe a few days before they figure out how to bypass the pulse weapon we used. After that, we'll need a backup plan." Leela nodded. "We don't have days. We need to act now." A plan began to form in her mind. Earth had been left behind. But that didn't mean there weren't pockets of technology scattered across the planet. Alien tech, human tech, old military systems, and even fragments of the caretakers' experiments. These pieces were a puzzle, one Leela knew they had to solve quickly. "We start by gathering more tech," she ordered, her mind already turning to the next step. "We'll send scouts to the old military bases, the research facilities. They've got equipment we can use, weapons we can adapt. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." As the children split into smaller groups to begin their search, Leela found herself once again alone with her thoughts. The victory had been sweet, but it had come at a cost. They had shown the aliens they could fight, but the Empire would surely retaliate. The caretakers had underestimated them before, but now the stakes were higher. And Leela knew the greatest challenge was still ahead. Weeks passed as the children scavenged through the ruins, gathering what they could from abandoned military installations, hidden research labs, and other forgotten remnants of the world. They didn't just take what they could find. They studied it, carefully dismantling the alien tech and learning its secrets. Theo, with his gift for mechanics, became the group's primary engineer, creating makeshift weapons, energy shields, and devices to block the alien tech from detecting their movements. In one such facility, they discovered something extraordinary, an old caretaker communications hub. It was buried beneath layers of concrete and rust, but the children, armed with nothing but their resourcefulness, had managed to access it. What they found there was a wealth of information. Blueprints, schematics, and the names of other caretaker strongholds scattered across the galaxy. It was more than they had ever hoped for. Leela studied the data intently. "This is it. This is how we win," she muttered to herself. The communications hub contained detailed plans for a network of satellites that the caretakers had once used to monitor Earth. The same satellites, which had been deactivated when the caretakers abandoned the planet, could be repurposed into a global defense system. If they could re-establish the satellite network, they could create a communication and defense grid that would allow them to track the movements of the Empire and prepare for any further invasions. It was a bold plan, an audacious one, but it was the only one that gave them a fighting chance. Leela turned to her group. "We can't just hide and hope for the best. We need to take the fight to them. This is our chance to hit them before they hit us. We can use the satellites to disrupt their communications and cripple their ability to coordinate." Theo's eyes lit up with understanding. "We'll need a relay station to activate the satellites. There's an old military base in the Arctic region. It might still have the infrastructure we need." Leela smiled, a fierce glint in her eye. "Then that's where we're going." The children, now united in their resolve, gathered their supplies and prepared for their next mission. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were warriors, engineers, and strategists. They were the last hope for Earth. And this time, they were going to make sure the Empire knew exactly who they were up against. The Arctic base was a distant memory for most of Earth's survivors. The frozen wasteland, far from the ravaged cities, had been abandoned long ago, even before the caretakers made their departure. It had been part of their network of hidden research facilities, a place where advanced technology was tested and modified. Now it was a forgotten outpost, buried beneath layers of ice and snow, its purpose lost to time. But to Leela and her group, it was a vital lifeline. They had planned for weeks, gathering supplies, studying the blueprints from the caretaker communications hub, and preparing for the harshest journey of their lives. The children knew they were about to embark on a perilous expedition, one that would push their limits in every way. The Arctic was unforgiving, and they would be traveling through blizzards, navigating frozen terrain that had swallowed entire military units in the past. But they had no choice. The fate of Earth rested on what they could accomplish there. Leela, standing in front of her group, surveyed the faces of the children she had come to rely on. They were scared, but determination burned in their eyes. They had faced so much already, and this was just another battle, one that they would win. "We leave at dawn," she said, her voice strong. "This isn't just about surviving anymore. This is about taking the fight back to them. We do this together, or we don't do it at all." With that, they set out. The journey was grueling. For days they trekked through the Arctic wasteland, the cold biting at their skin, the snow never ending. They had learned to move quickly and efficiently, using their knowledge of the environment to avoid blizzards and to make shelter when needed. The harsh winds made visibility nearly impossible, but Leela had trained the group to navigate without relying on sight. They used the feel of the wind, the subtle shift of the ground beneath their feet, and the natural landmarks around them. They were no longer children lost in a shattered world. They were survivors, hunters, explorers, and most of all, fighters. But even with their newfound skills, the cold was relentless. Several times, they were forced to take shelter for days at a time, waiting out brutal snowstorms. The constant struggle to keep warm, to stay fueled and hydrated, took its toll. And every time they thought they were close to their destination, something else slowed their progress. A sudden avalanche, a mechanical malfunction with their equipment, or even a small encounter with mutated wildlife that had adapted to the freezing conditions. Yet through each setback, Leela remained unwavering, constantly pushing them forward, never allowing them to lose hope. After what felt like an eternity, they'd finally reached the Arctic base. Hidden beneath the snow, it was a massive structure, once alive with activity and now silent and cold, its exterior damaged by years of neglect. The main entrance was sealed tight, covered by layers of ice, but Leila's eyes were sharp. She recognized a secondary access point on the schematic they had recovered, a maintenance shaft near the rear of the base. It took hours to break through the thick ice blocking the entrance, but when the hatch finally creaked open, a wave of relief washed over them. They had made it. Inside, the base was eerily quiet, filled with the faint hum of old, forgotten machines. The walls were covered with frost, and the air smelled of stale, long-abandoned equipment. Leila quickly assessed their surroundings, noting that much of the technology was either damaged or completely inactive. But there was still hope. They made their way through the base's dark corridors, following the schematic's directions to the main communication center. It was locked behind reinforced doors, but the children were resourceful. With a combination of mechanical ingenuity and sheer force, they pried the doors open. Inside, rows of old computers and communication consoles sat in dormant silence. Theo immediately went to work, carefully examining the control panels. His fingers flew over the dusty buttons, connecting wires, and making the necessary repairs. The base's systems had long been offline, but Theo's sharp mind and understanding of alien technology made him the perfect person for the job. Hours passed. Leila kept watch, her senses on high alert. They couldn't afford to let their guard down, even in the quiet of the abandoned base. Every moment felt like it could be their last. Finally, Theo let out a quiet, victorious cheer. It's working. I've linked into the old satellite network. Leela's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the key to everything. With this technology, they could activate the global defense system, disable alien communications, and track the movements of any incoming ships. But as she looked at the blinking screens and watched the data streams flood in, a chill ran down her spine. There was something else, something they hadn't anticipated. The satellites were still active, and they were transmitting a signal that was coming, straight from Earth. The Empire had known they were here, and they had been waiting. Leela's pulse quickened as she stared at the screens. Theo's fingers hovered over the controls, his eyes wide with disbelief. The data that flooded the consoles wasn't just from the satellites. They were receiving live transmissions from the Empire itself. The caretakers had indeed been watching, and the moment they activated the communications grid, they'd alerted the Empire to their presence. "How long do we have?" Leela asked, her voice steady despite the panic swirling inside her. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. They had expected retaliation, but this was something else. The Empire was already aware of their success. They had been waiting. Theo's brow furrowed as he ran his fingers over the controls. A matter of hours, maybe less. The signal they're sending is pinpointing our location. They've got it locked down. Once they recognize what we've done, they'll send everything they've got. Leela cursed under her breath. They had to act, and fast. The satellites were their best shot at disrupting the Empire's communication and potentially gaining the upper hand. But if the Empire sent reinforcements, they would be completely overwhelmed. The children had no backup, no weapons capable of taking on an entire invasion fleet. If the Empire retaliated immediately, Earth's survivors would be defenseless. She turned to the group, all of whom had gathered around, watching the data scroll past like a countdown to doom. "We need to make sure this message gets out to every last survivor on Earth. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone." "Leela, you're right," Theo said, shaking his head in frustration. "But even if we activate the satellites and broadcast the signal to Earth's survivors, we'll still be a target. We've turned the entire planet into a beacon." "We're already a target," Leela replied, her voice firm. "This is the only shot we've got. We give Earth's survivors the chance to unite. We'll send a signal to every corner of the planet. If we can organize the people, maybe we can finally fight back." A sudden thought struck her. "Theo, do you think you can disable the signal the Empire's sending? Shut it down before they trace us?" Theo nodded slowly, determination flickering in his eyes. "I can try, but it's going to take everything I've got. The tech they're using is unlike anything I've seen before. I might not be able to stop it completely, but I can at least delay it long enough for us to get the broadcast out." Leela looked at her group, their faces filled with both fear and hope. "All right," she said, her voice low and resolute. "You heard him. Theo, get to work. The rest of us will make sure nothing interrupts the broadcast. We're going to send that signal to every survivor we can find. This is our chance to wake up the world. No one gets left behind." As Theo dove into the systems, furiously working to decipher and disable the enemy's signal, the others quickly got to work. Ava, the quick-thinking girl who had shown such resourcefulness in the past, began searching through the control room, pulling out old communications devices, rewiring them, and linking them to the main system. The others prepared the makeshift broadcasting equipment they had set up, ensuring they could transmit to every part of the globe. Leela's mind raced. Every second they wasted now brought the Empire closer. She had seen the footage of their alien ships before, sleek, monstrous, and far too fast. If they didn't act soon, the Empire's forces would descend on them like a swarm of locusts. They had taken down a few soldiers, but that was nothing compared to the full might of the Empire's fleet. "We can't fail," Leela muttered to herself as she watched the group work, the harsh lights of the base casting long shadows on their determined faces. "We won't." The final moment was close. Leela felt the pressure of it, like a storm gathering in the distance, unstoppable and relentless. As the final wires were connected and the systems powered up, Leela felt a cold rush of fear. What if the Empire was already too advanced? What if they couldn't stop the signal? What if it was too late? Then, just as quickly, that fear was replaced by something else, a quiet, burning certainty. They weren't alone in this fight anymore. Earth wasn't alone. They had found each other in the darkness, had learned to rely on each other's strengths. Lila wasn't just fighting for her survival. She was fighting for humanity's survival. She was leading a movement that could not be extinguished. And that, she realized, was something the Empire could never have anticipated. The broadcast began. The hum of the equipment filled the room as the satellites overhead flickered to life, sending the signal out across the globe. It was a beacon of hope, an invitation to every human survivor, everywhere, to rise, to join the fight. And as the signal spread, Leela knew one thing for certain. The Empire had underestimated them before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But this time, the children of Earth weren't just waiting to survive. They were ready to strike back. The broadcast was live. Lila watched the screens flicker with the faint glow of data streaming out from the satellites above. The signal had been sent to every corner of the Earth, every hidden bunker, every isolated settlement, every remote outpost that might still have survivors. It was a simple message, but one that carried the weight of their future. We are still here. We fight. Join us. The room fell into a tense silence as the hum of the machines filled the air. Lila's heart pounded in her chest, but there was a fire in her eyes. This was their moment, the beginning of something much bigger than any one group, any single survivor, any solitary battle. This was the moment the world would awaken from the long, stifling sleep the Empire had forced it into. A crackling noise broke the silence. Leela snapped her head toward the speaker, her breath caught in her throat. It was faint at first, but then the voice came through, distorted but clear. Received. Alive. Responding. Theo scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with excitement. It's working. Someone's answering. It's coming through from a resistance group, on the outskirts of what was once China. Leela's pulse quickened. There was no time to waste. The signal had reached farther than they could have dreamed, and now they had an opportunity. The globe was responding, and Earth's survivors were uniting, answering the call. But there was no time for celebration. The Empire would not give them a moment's peace. They were coming, and they would be relentless. We need to move, Leela said, her voice sharp and commanding. Get ready. The Empire is coming for us, and they'll send everything they have. We need to meet them head-on before they can regroup. The group nodded in unison. There was no fear, only determination. They had been through too much to turn back now. In the following days, the children worked tirelessly, coordinating with the resistance groups that had received the broadcast. They helped rally the scattered survivors into organized units, arming them with whatever they could scavenge, and training them in guerrilla tactics. Lila led from the front, as always, ensuring that the children remained united. She knew that without each other, they stood no chance against the Empire's might. But together, they could fight. Together, they could win. It wasn't just the children now. It was everyone. The survivors had come out of hiding. People who had once cowered in fear were now rallying behind the children's cause. Former military personnel, scientists, engineers, even farmers, all now had a role to play in this new war for Earth's future. They were the vanguard of the resistance. Together, they built a network of safe houses, hidden communication relays, and makeshift weapon caches. For the first time in years, Earth wasn't waiting to die. Earth was fighting back. Then the enemy came. The Empire's ships descended, their sleek forms cutting through the sky like vultures circling their prey. But this time, Earth was ready. They had the element of surprise, the advantage of guerrilla warfare, and most importantly, each other. The children, now joined by dozens of survivors, had laid their own trap. The Empire's ships, accustomed to landing unopposed, made the critical mistake of assuming the humans were weak. But as they came closer to Earth's atmosphere, the Resistance launched their counterstrike, an unexpected assault using the very tech the children had scavenged, along with the communications grid that had connected them all. The battle was fierce, but it was clear from the start that this wouldn't be a one-sided war. The Resistance wasn't just a ragtag band of survivors anymore. They had the knowledge, the tools, and most importantly, the will to fight. In the chaos of battle, Leela found herself facing down the same kind of craft that had once hovered above Earth, watching with cold indifference as the humans below struggled. The Caretaker's warships had returned, but now they had an enemy who would not yield. The Empire's ships retaliated with brutal force, sending waves of laser fire toward the surface. But the Resistance, using the tech the children had so painstakingly reclaimed, launched their own countermeasures, hacking into the alien communication systems, disabling shields, and disrupting weapons. Leela, at the heart of the conflict, felt the weight of it all. They were no longer hiding. They weren't the victims. The Empire had made a grave mistake when they assumed Earth was lost. The children had led the charge, showing the galaxy that humanity would never be conquered. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for the future of their world, a world that refused to kneel before an alien empire. With a final, deafening explosion, the alien ships began to retreat, their command center shattered by the Resistance's coordinated strike. The Empire had underestimated Earth's resolve, and this time they had been forced to retreat. But as the smoke of battle cleared and Leela stood among the survivors, she knew the war wasn't over. The Empire would return, but now Earth had a fighting chance. The children had ignited a spark that had grown into a flame that could never be extinguished. The fight for Earth had just begun.